Hey guys, back at it again with the Squareback. Now based on my findings from that last video, I've pretty much determined that I'm going to have to pull the engine out. So now a lot of people on the internet will say that these Volkswagens are really easy to work on, and that they're basically like Legos. You can take them apart, put them back together, and supposedly it's really easy. But that's only if you are kind of already mechanically inclined and know exactly what you're doing, which is not me. So a lot of this I kind of had to learn on the fly. So I'm hoping that these video series will help people out there to understand how these Volkswagens are put together and taken apart. But for now, some of the main things that you want to look out for is making sure everything is completely unhooked from the engine that connects it to the actual car. So step one is to remove the battery off the terminals, which I've already done, so don't worry about that. Now you want to make sure all the wires from the engine harness are removed from the engine. There's really not a whole lot. It's like a couple of the wires go to this coil pack here, 2 wires go to the generator, and 1 wire goes to this oil pressure sensor here. Don't think there's really anything else as far as wiring goes. The next thing you want to make sure you take off is this oil bath air cleaner. You may have noticed a lot of Volkswagens don't even have this anymore. They pretty much just replaced it with the single unit air filters here, which gives it a whole lot more access up at the top. So if you do have this, make sure you remove this first. It's fairly simple. It's just these 3 wing nuts here. You gotta get this rod out of the way from the carburetor. Get this hose unhooked from whichever side you want and remove this off of this boot. So once that's out of the way, the next thing you want to do is this fuel line here. This fuel line goes to the fuel pump and it goes over to the fuel tank over there. So what you want to do is go underneath, get some vice grips and clamp it down from under there, and then you should be able to take this off. Make sure you put a towel, because there is still going to be a little bit of fuel in here and it's going to spill just a little bit. Then you can kind of just fish that out of this hole here from this backing plate. Once that fuel line is clamped, next thing you want to do is remove this. I think this is like an 8mm nut or bolt, but you just take that off and that removes the throttle cable, and again just fish it out through this hole here. And I think that's pretty much it. The carburetors, it's kind of up to you if you want to leave them on or take them off. Taking them off gives you just a little bit more extra clearance, but you don't necessarily have to take it off. Oh, actually, this clamp here holds onto this boot that's in there. I already had it removed from that last video when I was diagnosing the engine, but you want to make sure you take that off. But once that's completely out, then you should be able to just slide the engine out and then down and then completely remove it from the engine bay. So let's go ahead and get started. So starting off with the wiring. Just start unhooking everything one by one. These here I think are 8mm. And I think that's it for the wiring. So just kind of tuck that away, make sure it's not gonna get tagged up on anything. So next thing is getting this guy out. With that out of the way, next thing is the fuel line and the throttle cable. Let me just put this back together so I don't lose this. Now with all of that removed, I'm going to go ahead and crawl down underneath so I can clamp down this fuel line. So all you really need is one of these vice grips. I think I'll use this guy here. So now coming down underneath the car. Now I'm really glad I came down here because I actually forgot that I also do need to take these cables out before actually pulling the engine. Otherwise I would have just been tugging at it and it wouldn't have gone anywhere. But basically these cables here are just connected by that 8mm bolt up there, similar to how the throttle cable is connected up top. There's one here and one on the other side, both of which are connected to the heat exchangers over to the lever that's on the inside of the cab. So if you follow this through, it goes into this tube here. And on here, you just remove that bolt and then slide this cable out. Now right above that, you see where this fuel filter is. This line is the fuel line that you want to place that clamp down onto. Alright, I got the hose line clamped here. I have this cable removed from the heat exchanger along with the other one here. So we're pretty much done with everything we need to do down here. And I'm gonna go back to the top and I'm gonna unhook this fuel line and fish it out and then do the throttle cable and we should be ready to go. Not a whole lot of gas in there actually, so that's probably good. So I'll put this here. Last thing is the throttle cable. Okay, now with those out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this backing plate here. And it's just a couple of screws, one here, and then one down there at the corner. See what I mean? If you take off the carburetor, it just gives you a little bit more room to kind of work around it, but not absolutely necessary. Like so. The way I've done this before actually was really convenient, because what I did was I got one of these dollies and a piece of plywood. I put the floor jack underneath like that. The engine is supported underneath. Then I loosen all the bolts, slide the engine back and down, and as it's going down, it's gonna go right onto this dolly. So I'm gonna be lifting up this floor jack down here. Make sure this is somewhat balanced. And then just kind of leave it there just so it's supported, so it won't drop when you're loosening the nuts and bolts. So now with the bottom of the engine supported, I'm going to go ahead and loosen up these two nuts here, but I'm not going to completely remove them. Okay, with those two loosened, I'm going to go down underneath. I'm going to show you where the other two are. Here it is here. And there. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these, and then we'll go back up to the top. Now before you move on, make sure this is fully supported, because what we're gonna do now is remove these final two bolts. Put those to the side. Now the engine should be completely free from the car. Slowly start to shake the engine and hold on to something solid, like I'm holding onto the generator and this fan shroud. Don't hold on to like the carburetor or any of these cables or anything, or even this coil pack. But hold on to something that's like really solid. Let me go put some gloves on. Oh, you know what? I also forgot that you need to make sure the oil dipstick tube is removed. So that's my bad. Very important. After struggling with this for some time, I couldn't figure out why it just would not budge. Then I realized I forgot to mention these two bolts here. This is a 1967 Squareback. I believe it went up to 1969. I'm not sure when the IRS rear suspension was implemented, if it was either 68 or 70 maybe, but if you don't have this, then you have IRS, I think. If you don't have this, then it's probably going to be replaced by a mustache bar, which is a bar that bolts into the middle and goes to, I think it goes over to where the bumper mounts onto. But in this case, this is the swing axle, so all I need to do is remove these two 13mm bolts, and that will remove this circular engine mount. Once that's out, then I should be able to slide it right back. Okay, when you get this removed, you may or may not have these spacer things, but just make sure they don't fall off. And then this engine mount should just slide right back and out. If you look over here, you'll see there's kind of like a post, and it sits right along that engine mount. So just hold on to this. So now that's out, I should be able to just slide this on back. And there we go. Flywheel is now removed from the transmission, and again, I'm going to triple check, make sure nothing's still connected to the engine or caught onto it, and then when I'm good to go, I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down onto the dolly. Alright, I've gone ahead and checked to make sure nothing's caught. Now I just have to make sure I pull this far back enough so that the input shaft is no longer connected to the flywheel here. So I probably have about a ½ inch left to go, so I'm just gonna pull that back and see how where I had placed the floor jack directly underneath the center of the engine. Now it's perfectly balanced on that floor jack, so I can kind of move it around to a certain degree, so it's not gonna fall off. So don't be afraid to kind of move it around. So slowly pull out just a little bit and see how it's completely cleared the transmission there. Double check. So basically, I'm just gonna start to lower this floor jack as I'm sliding it out. Be very, very careful and slow. Don't be afraid to stop if you need to. And do this slowly. The slower you do this, the better off you are. And there we have it, completely removed. Instead of lifting up this corner any higher just to clear the engine, I ended up just using this other floor jack to put it under the beam, and I removed the jack stands there. That way it tilts this way. Now that it's a little bit higher here, I can just slide this on out. It doesn't even need to be supported by the jack anymore because it's on the dolly. And there we have it. That is pretty much the process of how to take out the engine. I do kind of want to show you how I situate this engine onto this dolly here. And you go down here, make sure that flow jack is centered. You lift it just enough so that you can move this around, nicely centered, and go ahead and drop it. And voila. Easy. I know there's a whole bunch of videos out there showing how to remove these, but I have yet to find any that's as detailed as I'd want it to be. So I'm hoping this video will help out a whole bunch of you guys. Good luck, guys.